I'd like to call to order the Oil and Gas Commission, Conservation Commission, and have roll call. Frank Thorwald.
Bob Wagner.
Bill Fire-Robin.
On the phone?
Stephen.
This is Kendra. I'm here.
This is Chris Hansen with the Arizona Geological Survey. I'm on the line as well.
Well, we have a quorum, so let's get started. Approval of the minutes from the meeting of January 15th, 2016. Any changes or comments? All in favor of approval of the, do I have a motion for approval of the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Frank, can I just remind you, for Kendra's benefit, she can't necessarily, doesn't know everyone's voice yet.
Okay.
Can we state our names to be a little more formal today than usual?
Frank Thorwald.
This is Bob Wagner. I made the motion to approve.
Thank you, guys.
Bill Fire-Robin, second.
All in favor of the, Frank Thorwald, all in favor of the approving the minutes from the January 15th meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. On the phone?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Minutes have been approved. Is there any conflicts of interest from anyone?
No, this is Bob, no.
Bill Fire-Robin, no.
Frank Thorwald, no conflict. Hearing no conflicts of interest, let's move on to the State Geologist Report, Administrative Budget, and the Legislative Matters.
This is Chris Hansen, Deputy Director of the Arizona Geological Survey, stepping in for Lee Allison today. Just a quick update on a couple items. Some were reported on last meeting by Lee, that I think he had mentioned that the governor's budget had proposed transferring the Arizona Geological Survey over to the University of Arizona. And the only items to report there is that discussions are ongoing with the university to make that happen with the officials over there. So looking at budgets and program areas, etc. So that's a work in progress, and we can keep you updated as that moves along. So I don't know if there's any. I could stop there. If there's any questions there, I could just deal with that at the end of the report. Can move into the legislative items. The Senate Bill 1059, and that's to extend the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission for 8 years. The maximum term was introduced in the Senate, Arizona Senate, on January 11th. Hearing was held on January 25th, so it was moving along fairly quickly. That hearing was held by the Senate Commerce and Workforce Development Committee, and that passed unanimously 9-0. And then after that, just going through the procedures in the Senate, it passed the Rules Committee. It also was passed by the Senate majority and minority caucuses. They both gave the thumbs up to move that on. So the next step, next major step, would be going to the Senate for a full vote, and then over to the House as it moves along. So that's on a fast track for approval currently. So we're keeping tracking that and monitoring that, and as that progresses, and we'll keep you updated on that as it goes. Another bill of interest is on the House side. It's HB 2407, which would prohibit hydraulic fracturing. This is virtually the same bill that was introduced last session that had gone nowhere. It was last session. It was introduced and not assigned even to a committee, so it did not progress. And so far in this session, it was introduced on January 14th, and to date also has not been assigned to a committee. So it's tracking along the same vein as last year, not being assigned, not going anywhere. But it is a bill of high interest, and we certainly are tracking that to see, if there's any movement or that gets any traction. So those are the two primary bills of interest. I don't know, Niall, you were at the hearing. I don't know if you just have any other comments to add at this time.
Not really. Any idea when we'll see legislation dropped regarding the transfer of the GS to the U of A or the oil and gas to DEQ?
No, not yet. It's still at the stage of discussions between, I guess, three-way discussion that the governor's office is facilitating between the governor's office, the University of Arizona, and the Arizona Geological Survey. So those discussions. So basically, there's a group of representatives from those three bodies that are forming a work group or ad hoc work group to look at the terms and figure out what it would mean and answer the university's questions. And as of last week, the university was asked to come back within 2 weeks with to hammer out a proposal and come back with any questions that they have, and to come up with a solution within 2 weeks. So I think once that goes through that process, then we'll see what that looks like, and I think that would shape any legislation. So that first stage has to complete first before it goes to legislation.
Any thoughts with regard to the HB 2407 or the 1059 that anybody wants to talk about?
The Bill Fire-Robin, the 2407 was the fracking, is that
Yes,
correct?
the hydraulic fracturing.
Yeah, okay. I'd have some comments, but it's when we get to the time that it becomes a little bit serious on that. I don't see any reason at this point.
Well, some thoughts here. Do we, given that it hasn't gone into a committee yet, we certainly don't want to put any coals on the fire. Would we be better off debating the pros and cons of it at this point, and having our opinion known now, or holding back our opinion until such time that it might be assigned to a committee? Any thoughts?
This is Bob Wagner. As near as I can see, it's almost a moot issue, isn't it? Geologically, there's not much in this state that would be subject to the fracking process other than what's on the reservations, which I believe was not under our purview, is it?
Niall, what's going on?
That could be the case, but I also think it sends a very negative signal just across to all types of activity.
I'm
so
not
that it's
fact.
mute might be true, but I still think it would send that
Right.
negative message to industry.
And my own personal opinion is that if it's just a matter of the type of signal that's sent, negative, positive, or neutral, is probably not, in my opinion, a commission issue.
This is Rick Zeiss. One of the issues I've heard is that it's very restrictive, as currently drafted, to injecting any type of fluid into the ground, whether it is liquid, steam, and there's a group of projects, my understanding, in Arizona that are looking into possibly using it for recovery of other minerals. Copper's one of them, I've heard. So we may want to wait until it moves to committee and we see what the language is before we get a little more in depth in discussion. Otherwise, we may be talking out of school, so to speak.
Yeah, Bill Fire-Robin, but that's not fracking. So it becomes what exactly are we talking about? Because that in situ leaching is not fracking. It's a totally other process.
again, this is Rick Zeiss. That's my understanding. However, the way the legislation was drafted, I'm looking at it currently now, and there may be some requirements of some clarification, because if it does go to committee, my belief is that you will see various mining companies will step in with their thoughts on ensuring that their processes aren't interrupted by vagueness in a statute. But again, if we're not in committee and we're not going to discuss it today, it's up to you if you want to move on or not.
Anything online from anyone?
This is Stephen Cooper. I would suggest that we at least show an inclination to oppose this bill. I would rather be in front of it than behind it. I think there needs to be a reasoned approach with regards to the issue of fracking, and this needs to be, interaction between the Oil and Gas Commission, ADEQ, and the Department of Water Resources. I think that there can be some reasonable criteria that could be set that would protect basically aquifers from being, potentially being contaminated. But I think that the blanket approach to ban everything sends the wrong message to the industry, and really, in my mind, defeats the purpose of the Oil and Gas Commission, which is to promote the growth of an oil and gas industry in the state of Arizona.
This is Frank Thorwald. I agree with Steve on that as well. Niall, is there currently any fracking in the state?
If we think of the activity that we typically would see with a number of kilometer-long horizontal wells being fracked, like we might see in Pennsylvania in the Marcellus Shale, the answer would be no.
Is there going to be any needed with regard to any of the other future production, the CO2, helium, etc.?
I kind of concur with Rick's assessment. In developing a well, we typically see some fluids injected, and they may result in enhanced flow by enhancing some of those existing fractures. And so in that sense, fracking is a common part of almost all this activity.
Would this bill prevent that?
This bill doesn't draw any distinctions. It seems like it's a blanket thrown on the whole subject.
So it would stop all of that?
Again, that's why we have courts and lawyers, but yeah, these are the kind of things that then get thought about. Mm-hmm. Definitions.
Any discussion on the pros and cons of hydraulic fracturing as it relates to this?
Not at this time.
Steve, anything from you?
Other than my prior comments, that's all I've got to say on the subject.
As I mentioned earlier, rather than throwing coal on the fire, if we do this, would we want, either way, I don't know how the commission's going to go on this, but it would seem that it would be better to hold back and until the such time it was put in a committee and not raise any more attention to the subject. Any thoughts on that?
This is Bob Wagner. I agree that I think we need to see something solid that we can actually make comments on. At this point, we're kind of speculating about what it means, what it includes. As you said, it's a broad blanket thing, and I think we need more details personally before we actually take a position formally.
Have you seen the language in the bill? There's a
No.
copy right here. If you want, we just Rick pass it over and show them the key. There's two key areas, one in about page 4 and then one buried way back, but they're highlighted in color, so that if you flip to there, you'll see them very readily.
Bill Feierabend, could I request that, obviously we're doing it, but just be sure that if this thing gets formalized, something a little bit more than a blanket thing, if it moves into committee, that it be immediately brought into discussion here at that point. If we're not going to talk about it now, that just make a point that we be sure and talk about it if it moves into committee and becomes something that's seriously part of the political process.
Well, the other issue is too, some of the commissioners may not be around or available for a quick meeting to determine, you know, our position on the issue. So it might be better to go ahead and make that determination now and then hold back until such time that it did move into a committee, or try to put everybody back together at that time. Any thoughts on that? I think it's better.
This is Stephen Coop.
Go ahead, Steve.
I would probably at this time, I would suggest maybe that we give at least an instruction to staff that the commission is opposed to a blanket prohibition against fracking, and that we welcome an opportunity to participate in a dialogue as to adopting reasonable regulations. And maybe we just do that as a form of a motion, and then we can certainly wait to see what is presented. But at least we let them know that we do have some opposition as to a general prohibition, and that there needs to be some more discussion as to the regulations.
Steve, are you putting that into as a motion?
Yes.
I'll second the motion. This is Frank Thorwald.
Could you kind of repeat the nature of that motion?
Probably not, but I'll try. My motion is that we instruct staff that the Oil and Gas Commission is inclined to oppose a bill which provides for a blanket prohibition against fracking, but the Commission welcomes an opportunity to have a dialogue as to any bill introduced as to the issues of fracking in the state of Arizona.
Okay.
Could we take out that Bill Fire on that inclined to?
Yeah, I was going to mention.
Just make it.
Take out. Let's just be against it.
Do we want to
I
add?
would accept the amendment.
Okay.
Yeah, I would accept the amendment to my motion.
Steve, would Frank Thorwald here. Steve, would we want to have anything in there that would also add to that more specific things with regard to injection as well? Because since this bill also just talks about limiting injection, fluids, types of fluids that would be injected.
Chairman, since you are a little more versed in the industry than I am, if you have language you think that would be more appropriate or better crafted, I'd be happy to hear it and consider amending my motion to have those provisions put in.
Does anybody think anything should be amended to that?
I'm fine.
I'm fine with that.
Okay. Well, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Steve?
Aye.
The motion carries.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposition. The motion carries. Any further discussion on any of the legislation?
Okay, this is the question I'd have, Bill Fireoven. Maybe I missed it, but there hasn't been any really background information on how the budget point came up to move Oil and Gas Commission to, ADQ and, these movements.
Chris, do you want to cover that one?
Right. So far, where that stands is in the governor's proposed budget, as well as moving, along with moving the Arizona Geological Survey to the University of Arizona. The governor's office is also proposing to move the Oil and Gas Commission over to DEQ. So that it's still pending. It's still in a proposal stage. So as the governor's budget progresses, that'll be firmed up as well as the full budget package gets amended and moves forward into the legislature. So I guess that's a long way of saying I don't have any additional updates to that, other than that's the proposal that's on the table. and that we're monitoring that and obviously keeping close discussions with the governor's office on their thoughts and as that progresses.
This is Bob Wagner. When I read this information, I made the assumption that the transfer of the geological group to the University of Arizona would then eliminate the oversight by a state agency of this commission, so therefore they were left with the option that we have to put them under somebody that's an official state organization. Am I correct, or is that the main reason that they want to move us, or is there some other motive that I'm missing?
No, this is Chris. No, that's correct. That would be the motivation to do that, since the Arizona Geological Survey would no longer be a state department or state agency, directly. Then that would retain the Oil and Gas Commission under the state umbrella as within the state system, state agency system.
So the DES was chosen because of lack of any other thing. I wonder why not the water department or something like that. I suppose that we'd have to ask the governor then.
That brings up another good question with regard to that. Obviously, regulations are not only DEQ, but also approval process from the water department. Is there going to be any streamlining of that within any of this legislation for that process?
There could be. There's nothing on the table yet, so it's still a lot of it's pending with the governor's budget and what he's proposing. So there's an ample opportunity for a lot of that to be amended before that's accepted by the legislature or other legislation spawned off of that in response to what the governor is proposing. So a lot of that is still in flux.
This is Bob Wagner again. This commission has had a long relationship with the land department, almost as closely as the Geological Society, and I guess I was personally a little surprised that we weren't being transferred to the land department and being oversight. Has that ever been discussed?
Not to my knowledge. This was just all we have so far is the information that was proposed from the governor's office. I don't know what they were considering, but being that it's all still in the proposal stage, that there is that potential opportunity, or at least hypothetical opportunity, to influence that and to have the thoughts brought up to the governor's office on that. So it's just all proposed at this point in time.
Frank Thorwald again. Has there been any discussions with regard to any changes on our responsibilities on the geothermal side of it as well?
No, none have been discussed that we're aware of.
Okay.
No.
Any further discussion on the legislation, budget, and administration? Then let's move on
This
to...
is Stephen.
Yes, Stephen.
Yeah, Mick, I apologize, but my comment would echo the other commissioners, that I think if we were to be moved, I think the State Land Department would be more appropriate. Placing us with the ADEQ, which basically is a rule-making regulatory agency, would basically take away from the independence of the Oil and Gas Commission, and may also thwart the Oil and Gas Commission's ability to have rulemaking, because they will be controlled by another agency whose rules may not, for whatever reason, coincide with the goals and requirements of the Oil and Gas Commission to basically further develop these natural resources in the state. I would at least like to put on record that we do have these concerns, and that we certainly would oppose it, but if we had to go someplace else, the State Land Department would be far more appropriate than ADEQ.
This is Frank Thorwald. is there any advantages to DEQ or water or land with regard to the streamlining of the regulatory process and approval process?
No, none at this time.
I wouldn't think so.
Frank, if I could just interject some. This is Joe Dixon with the Arizona State Land Department. One of the reasons that the Land Department, the Oil and Gas Conservation Commission used to be part of the State Land Department. It was kind of taken out of our hands because it was felt that the State Land Department is basically strictly responsible just for state trust lands. Anything occurring off of state trust lands, we should have no interest or say in. And we've never been a regulatory agency either, so we're trying to regulate the activities, especially on other lands, would seem to be something that was out of our jurisdiction.
Okay.
Did everybody online hear that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Any motions or anything else before we move on? Okay, report of Oil and Gas Administrator about new permits and drilling activity.
This is Niall. Don't have anything to report on that matter, other than I've got a sundry notice from Plains that in a couple of weeks they're going to rework the injection well for the Bumstead Cavern number 3, and then they're going to conduct their mechanical integrity test after that, so that'll be coming up in a couple of weeks.
Any discussion on that? Any questions?
No.
Review of the American West Potash bond issue. Any further updates on that?
I would suggest we go into an executive session, please.
Okay.
This is Rick Zeiss from the Attorney General's office.
This is Bob Wagner. I make a motion we move to executive session.
Frank Thorwald, I move we second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 We're in executive session.
Thank you. Contact with Tom Galvin, who's counsel for both American West and, well, actually not counsel, more of a consultant to American West and to Carlson. Our discussion was he does not have enough information to point one way or another. My suggestion is we file a complaint and intervention, which basically puts the decision in the court's hands, not our hands. The good part of that is the second part of the statute that authorizes that says there should be no liability on behalf of this agency for any action taken by the court, which was my goal all along, was to make sure that if someone's going to make the decision, it's clear enough that if we end up with litigation, I can defend it, or in the alternative, we get a court to make a decision for us. The way it would work is that I will file the complaint in interpleader, request a hearing probably 30, 45 days out, would be my guess. Each party who has a possible claim to this bond, which is whether it's American West Potash, Carlson, or maybe even Prospect Global Resources, which is, he's the gentleman who's kind of caused the problems. They all are going to give a chance to come to court, provide information to the court as to why they're entitled to it. If they don't show up in court, they waive their right. My guess is 2 of the people aren't going to show up in court. But I would rather have that happen in court than happen before us. And that's been my thought all along. I don't want to take a step and find us in litigation. I'd rather do this now. There has been a lot of political pressure coming from the Rose Law Group, who also apparently has people who know the Attorney General. So I've got someone looking over my shoulder every step right now, which adds to the enjoyment. But I do, again, I have a complaint drafted. The way this will work is I will go back. It's a complaint with 10 exhibits, 11 exhibits. I'm going to go back right now, finish drafting it. By that I mean go through it one more time, make sure everything, all my I's are dotted, T's are crossed. One of the questions is, do you have any information as to the proper format, how to sue as the Oil and Gas Commission? I represent the other agency you heard about today, the Arizona Department of Environmental Quality. As a general rule, they are sued when we sue somebody. It's State of Arizona, XREL, Misael Cabrera as director of ADEQ, because he has been appointed to that position based upon statute. Is there a similar point for the Oil and Gas Commission, or do you know? I don't think there is.
I don't know.
My suggestion would be to have Frank, you sign on behalf of the Oil and Gas Commission. and I bring it in that manner. If there is a statutory problem with it, I'm sure the court's going to point it out. But given that we're saying we have no argument one way or another where the money goes, I don't think the court's going to cause us a problem with it. Basically, we're going to court and saying, here's $50,000, you decide how to take care of it. So my suggestion is we file it in that manner. It has to be a verified complaint, which means you have to read it, review it, go through the facts, and then sign it as the Oil and Gas Commissioner, as the chairman. I would, again, then I file it, and then I take the steps to get hearing dates so that we can resolve these issues. That's my suggestion. I believe you're going to have a vote of the board when we go back out of executive session as to what you wish to do. So if you have any questions of me, feel free to ask.
Okay,
Any discussion?
What would the nature of the motion be?
The motion is that it explains how the nature of the motion to bottom line it is the Oil and Gas Commission doesn't have sufficient information to determine who the money should be returned to.
Right, okay.
And so we're asking the court to make that determination for us. And it's a great position to be in because I don't really have any argument to court. All I do is go to court and say, I have this bond, I have a cash deposit, I have 3 possible people, I put them all on notice, whoever shows up can argue and you tell me, work with it. And that way a decision's made without having liability come back on. And I've had long conversations with Tom Galvin about this, and my thing is, Tom, there's too many parts moving in this. And I mentioned a gentleman named Patrick Avery. Patrick Avery wired the $50,000 cash performance bond. But he identified himself as both CEO of Prospect Global Resources, also as president of American West Potash.
So it isn't clear. Oh, jeez.
Therein lies my entire problem.
Yeah.
Is Patrick Avery then is in correspondence with Steve Rousey, and half the time he signs on behalf of American West Potash, and the other half the time he signs and has letterhead saying Prospect Global Resources. Now, Prospect Global Resources, I don't think is doing business anymore. But I don't want us to take that risk. Have them come back and say, wait a minute, I wired this money to you, and you never put me on notice, you never did anything to tell me that the money was getting returned. I'd rather the court say, I gave him notice, and he didn't show up. And that really is the crux, because there's enough documents now where I can chase down where the money in the 14 wells, there's a blanket bond, and I talked to Niall, all 14 of the wells have been closed pursuant to statute. So all of the conditions preceding to return of that bond are met. But who do I return it to is now my problem.
I think his proposal is a slam dunk for me.
I agree.
Again, I play safe because I'm representing a state agency. If I were in private practice, I might go different. But I'm no longer in private practice, and again, my goal is to make sure we don't end up in litigation.
No, I think it's built fire of, and I think that's good, solid advice. But now, what do we invite everybody back in and then make a motion?
Yep.
So how? I mean, I could make a motion, but you know, I think it'd be good if we could work out the wording, invite them back in, and we all.
You make a motion to authorize the Office of the Attorney General to file a complaint and interpleader on behalf of the oil and gas.
Complaint and what?
Interpleader.
Interpleader.
That's a legal term saying, here's the money, you play Solomon and you decide where it goes. That's it's a motion and interpleader.
Would it be appropriate when we go back into session to ask him to state that for us, and then
I can probably give
one
you
of us say, I
Why
propose we do
Why
that.
don't we just do it now, and then we've got what he would say, but it's coming from the commission.
I would prefer it that
So
way.
we authorize the Office of the Attorney General
of the Arizona Office of the Attorney General to file a complaint and interpleader in Maricopa County Superior Court.
as an
INTERPLEADER, interpleader,
EAD.
in Maricopa County Superior Court to allow the court to determine the appropriate party to whom we are going to return the funds. And again, once I have an order, then I come back to you. You authorize the AZGS. So hopefully this happens before any vote happens on what happens to the AZGS. And we move that way.
Another complication, yeah, I hadn't thought of that.
I don't think we're going to, we're not going to get a bill and we're not going to get passage in the next 30 to 45 days. I just don't feel it. And then I'm out of a job because state lands can come in, although state lands is now fighting back. So we'll see where we end up.
Do we have a motion to?
We need.
You don't need a motion to come out of executive.
Executive, get them back in here. And
No, we
then
don't.
Bill.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Carries.
That was a motion to exit executive session.
Yes.
Did you like that? Dot the I and cross the T now.
It was good.
Ones we don't dot the T and cross the I.
Sir, when you get a chance, could you sign our sign-in sheet? Yellow
Right here on
sheet at the end of the table. Thank you.
Do I have a motion on adopting a position on the proposed Arizona, American Potash, America West Potash? Or do we have any proposals on that?
Let me try.
Mr. Chairman, this is,
Go ahead.
oh, go ahead.
No, please go.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, this is Stephen Cooper. Given the fact that we have competing claims for the money and the commission does not know who, in fact, is the legal or true owner of the bond, I would make the following motion. I would move that we direct the Arizona Attorney General's office to file an action, an interpleader in a superior court for the court to determine who is entitled to receive the proceeds of the bond subject to the claims that have been made in this matter. I further request, my motion further states that we also authorize the chairman of the Oil and Gas Commission to sign any and all pleadings necessary to institute the legal action.
Second. Bob Wagner seconds.
Frank Thorwald, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries. The next one is the adoption of position on the proposed legislation, which we did during the earlier number 4. So let's move on from that. Call to the public. Anybody from the public wish to speak at this point? Nobody from the public wishes to speak. Any further announcements?
Just as a reminder, we've still got our regularly scheduled next quarterly meeting set for April 15th. And in the intervening couple of weeks, I figured out that I was correct. We don't need to file our taxes on April 15th. We get to do that on April 18th because there's a holiday in Washington, D.C. on the 15th, so the IRS won't be in the office.
I will be out of country at that time, so I won't be able to. I won't be back in country till mid-May. If you can have a meeting without me.
Any
Let's
suggestion
get a
of
quorum
moving the
that's-
meeting?
We could, would anybody be able to be available in mid-May, or would that be an issue for anyone?
As best I know, I'm fine. No fire on it.
When will you be back? Frank Thorwald.
Yeah, I'll be back by mid-May. Trying to get an exact date. I think it's something like the 11th or 12th of May I'll be back.
What is that schedule during that time frame for the?
I'm going to look up a calendar date.
Anybody have on online if we have any issues if we change our next meeting date until May?
Friday the 13th
This is
would be...
Stephen Coop.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
I can
Steve.
adjust my schedule accordingly.
Looking at a kind of normal Friday meeting dates, Friday the 13th in May would be the next date after you're back.
I'll be back sometime that week.
You want to make it a week later?
It would be better for me if you want to change it, then
So we could look at making it Friday the 20th?
that works for me.
That avoids some silly superstition fears.
Yeah, Frank Thorwald, that works for me as well, Friday, May 20th. Stephen, does that work for you?
I will make it work.
Okay. Then we will change the date. Do we need a motion for that, to change the date?
I'm not sure. Why don't you make a motion? Just
Okay,
to be clear?
I would make a motion, Frank Thorwald, I make a motion that we change our next meeting date from April 15th to May
20th.
May 20th of 2016.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 The motion carries. We're now at May 20th for our next meeting.
And Frank, before we officially adjourn, I'd just like to read something into the record here. I know those of us who had the privilege of knowing him, Ben Donigan was one of the handful of people kind of working in the oil and gas industry here in Arizona. We learned of his passing last January 27th, and we will all be missing him. He was probably one of the nicest and finest people in the oil and gas community we had the privilege of working with here. So just wanted to kind of get that into the record a little bit.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank, I'd like if we can go back to the public comment for just a minute.
Sure.
That's a beautiful phrase.
In terms of the proposal to move the Arizona Geologic Survey under the University of Arizona.
Can we get you to identify
Oh, yeah,
yourself for the
my name is
record?
Gordon Dudley.
Thank you, Gordon.
I am curious to know what the position, is this a fait accompli that's going to happen? Are they still seeking input on whether it's a good idea, a bad idea? I am a little bit concerned if it goes under the university and the budget for the university is cut, that the budget for the geologic survey is going to suffer likewise. And those are all concerns to me. Are those being addressed, and what are the feelings of those on the commission for that happening?
Personally speaking, as a member of the commission, I don't see that has a direct impact on the commission per se. I think it's a political economic decision that's being made. And my biggest concern is where the commission ends up reporting to afterwards.
But and if the geologic survey does not go under the U of A, then the commission will remain under the geologic department, correct? So I guess to that end, it does affect the commission, at least indirectly. But I'm a little bit anytime they move something into the university, and with the university's budgets getting cut, it's just a concern as a citizen that I have as to whether the geologic survey will be able to effectively accomplish its mission if it's somewhere else. And the end.
Gordon, your concerns noted. I think the key thing to do is to wait and see what gets dropped in terms of bills in it. And, we'll watch as this moves forward.
Thanks.
And as part, it's a part of the political process. You're a citizen.
Yeah.
Any other announcements? Motion to adjourn?
This is Bob Wagner. I move we adjourn.
Frank.
Okay. Bill Fire second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries. We're adjourned.